A pleasant day to everyone. Our session today promises an engaging and enlightening experience for all of us. Let us take advantage of this opportunity to grow and learn together. Please allow me to express my gratitude and appreciation to our SDS, Engineer Edgar C. Domingo, our ASDS, Mamina Gracia L. Acosta and Sir Ronilo E. Hilario, our CID Chief, Ma'am Jane M. Garcia, and of course to our EPS in ICT and ADM, Sir Labern A. Ladignon Jr., to our PSDS in SDO Rizal Annex, Ma'am Elizabeth P. Sibayan, and to all the AMCEL proponents of TAO DIBA or Technical Assistance on Digital Bloom Assessment. Congratulations and thank you for this noble endeavor to help our teachers in designing ICT-based formative assessments. To all our participants, the distinguished group of master teachers from the elementary level, it is my honor to share this journey of learning and discovery. I am very grateful for this opportunity to learn with you. I am Lourdes C. de la Merced, Master Teacher 2 of Rizal National High School, and my topic is about designing ICT integration plan. Henry Stanley Judd made it known to us that a good plan is like a roadmap. It shows the final destination and usually the best way to get there. As teachers, we consider ourselves as daily planners. We plan our daily lesson because we want to achieve the best possible results, not for ourselves, but for our learners. The final destination in the daily lesson is to see our students acquire the knowledge and skills they will be needing in their present and future life. And today, I hope I could take you to the final destination of being able to create a plan with ICT integrated formative assessments. At the end of the session, the participants are expected to revisit the key concepts in DepEd Order number 42, Series 2016, which is entitled Policy Guidelines on Daily Lesson Preparation for the K-12 Basic Education Program, and DepEd Order number 8, Series 2015, or the Policy Guidelines on Classroom Assessment for the K-12 Basic Education Program. Next is to acquire knowledge and skills in developing lesson plans with ICT integration, and to develop lesson plans that incorporate ICT integrated activities and formative assessments to support students' acquisition of knowledge. As stated in the DepEd Order number 42, Series 2016, there are 3 steps in the educational or instructional process, according to Eration 1994. So what are these 3 steps of the instructional process? So the first one is planning instruction. The second one is the delivery of instruction. And then the third one is assessment of learning. So this means that teaching begins even before a teacher steps in front of a class and begins a lesson. This also means that teachers are expected to be able to organize and develop a plan for teaching, implement that plan, and measure how effectively they implemented a plan. We plan, we deliver our instruction, and we assess learning. So what about the elements of a lesson plan? Experts agree that a lesson plan should aim to answer the following questions according to Virginia Department of Education. So what are these 3 elements? The first one, what should be taught? Next, how should it be taught? And number 3, how should learning be assessed? So teachers must have a deep understanding of the curriculum and strive to teach its content. In planning daily lessons, teachers need to follow the curriculum guide of the learning area being taught. Then, with a lesson plan, teachers can predict which parts of the lesson learners will have difficulty understanding, and teachers can then prepare strategies to help learners learn, build their understanding, and respond to their needs. And this is also the time when the teachers can explore and use different ways in which the learners could master the content of a particular learning area. Also, effective teachers do not only prepare lesson plans, they also prepare an assessment plan, or specifically a formative assessment plan. And this formative assessment will help the students identify their strengths and weaknesses in order to learn from the assessment experience. How are learners assessed in the classroom? So there is an individual formative assessment and collaborative formative assessment. So when we say individual formative assessment, it enables the learner to demonstrate independently what has been learned or mastered through a range of activities. So what are these activities that we can use for individual formative assessment? So we can use check-up quizzes, written exercises, performances, models, and even electronic presentations. In terms of collaborative formative assessment or peer or group assessment, this one allows students to support each other's learning. So in what way can we do the collaborative formative assessment? So we can do that through discussions, role-playing, games, and other group activities. So formative assessment may be integrated in all parts of the lesson. So we can integrate formative assessment before the lesson, during the lesson, and after the lesson. So how can we integrate formative assessment before the lesson? So this one is the formative assessment conducted before the lesson informs the teacher about the student's understanding of a lesson or topic before direct instruction. So this kind of assessment helps teachers understand where the students stand in terms of conceptual understanding and application. So this one also provides the teachers for making instructional decisions, such as moving on to a new lesson or clarifying prerequisite understanding. Next, how do we integrate formative assessment during the lesson proper? So formative assessment conducted during the lesson proper informs teachers of the progress of the students in relation to the development of the learning competencies. So this kind of assessment helps the teacher determine whether instructional strategies that are being utilized in the classroom are effective. And the results of this formative assessment given at this time may be compared with the results of the formative assessment given before the lesson. So this is to establish whether conceptual understanding and application have improved. So on this basis, the teacher can make decisions on whether to review, whether to reteach, remediate, enrich the lesson, or move on to the next lesson. And then the formative assessment, which is integrated after the lesson. We do this formative assessment after the lesson assesses whether learning objectives were achieved. Okay, so this one also allows the teacher to evaluate the effectiveness of instruction. Students who require remediation or enrichment should be helped by the teacher using appropriate teaching strategies. So what about the purposes of formative assessment? Okay, so before the lesson, the purpose of formative assessment before the lesson in terms of the learner's perspective is to know what he or she knows about the topic or lesson, understand the purpose of the lesson and how to do well in the lesson, identify ideas or concepts that she or he misunderstands, identify barriers to learning. And then for the teacher, first is to get information about what the learner already knows and can do about the new lesson, share learning intentions and success criteria to the learners, determine misconceptions and identify what hinders learning. So what are the examples of assessment methods? So we can use here the agree or disagree activities. Next is games. We can also do interviews, inventories, checklists of skills relevant to the topic in a learning area. The KWL activities, what I know, what I want to know, and what I learned. Open-ended questions, and even practice exercises. So those are the examples of assessment methods that we can use before the lesson. Then what about during the lesson proper? So the purpose of having this kind of formative assessment during the lesson proper is to identify one's strengths and weaknesses, identify barriers to learning, identify factors that help him or her learn, know what he or she knows and does not know, and monitor his or her own progress. And for the teacher, this kind of assessment could provide immediate feedback to learners, identify what hinders learning, identify what facilitates learning, identify learning gaps, track learner progress in comparison to formative assessment results prior to the lesson proper, to make decisions on whether to proceed with the next lesson, reteach, or provide for corrective measures or reinforcements. So what are the examples of assessment methods that we could use during the lesson proper? We can use multimedia presentations, observations, other formative performance tasks such as simple activities that can be drawn from a specific topic or lesson. We can also do quizzes, recorded but not graded. We can also do recitations and simulation activities. And then what about the formative assessment after the lesson? What are its purposes? So for the learner, this is to tell and recognize whether he or she met learning objectives and success criteria, seek support through remediation, enrichment, or other strategies. And for the teacher, this is to assess whether learning objectives have been met for a specified duration, remediate or enrich with appropriate strategies as needed, evaluate whether learning intentions and success criteria have been met. The examples of assessment methods that we can use after the lesson are checklists, discussion games, performance tasks that emanate from the lesson objectives, practice exercises, short quizzes, and written work. So those are the purposes of formative assessment before, during, and after the lesson with the examples of assessment methods. What about in planning for integration of ICT in teaching and learning and assessment? So it's not only about the integration of ICT in teaching and learning, but also we can use this as integration of ICT in teaching and learning and assessment, according to Bennett 2007. So the first one is to determine the ICT teaching objectives for the planning period, such as year, term, or half term, clarify key concepts or key topics for each subject for the planning period. So ICT integration in teaching and learning involves all activities and processes with the use of technology. So this one will help promote learning and enhance the abilities and skills, not only of the teachers, but also of the learners. But first, we have to know the learning competencies or the teaching objectives that we have to cover within the grading period or within a semester. And then what's next? We also have to clarify the key content areas or the key topics within the grading period or within the semester. So this will be very important for the planning period, whether what ICT tools we're going to use for our students. So next, identify opportunities for ICT within each subject and select and adapt the ICT projects which are most appropriate for achieving the ICT objectives within subject contents. So with the availability of ICTs in schools, teachers can integrate technology in the planning, delivery, and assessment of instruction. However, we have to know what are the ICTs that are available in the school and accessible for the learners, whether software or hardware, and we have to select the most appropriate tool that we could use in order for the learners to master the competencies required in the subject. So again, those are the factors that we have to consider in planning for integration of ICT in teaching and learning and assessment. Okay, so in terms of lesson planning, I'm sure everyone knows about what lesson planning is all about. So it's not just a way of visualizing a lesson before it is taught, but according to Scrivener 2005, planning a lesson entails prediction, anticipation, sequencing, and simplifying. So as part of planning an instruction, we prepare a lesson plan, and by planning a lesson, we set learning targets for our learners, and our lesson plan, that one guides us as we help our learners reach those targets. So we predict, we anticipate, we do the proper sequencing or pacing of our lessons, and we simplify things to make it easier for our students to understand our lesson. So what are the parts of a daily lesson log and a daily lesson, detailed lesson plan? So we have the objectives. I'm sure everybody knows about this already. So learning resources, procedures, remarks, and reflection. So teachers who have been in the service for at least 1 year, handling learning areas with available LMs and TGs provided by the DepEd, shall not be required to prepare a DLP. Instead, they shall be required to fill out a weekly, daily lesson log. Whereas the newly hired teachers without professional teaching experience shall be required to prepare a daily, detailed lesson plan or DLP for a year. So those are the parts of a DLL and DLP. So now let's have a sample daily lesson log as an attachment and the DepEd order number 42 series 2016. So we have here the name of the school, the teacher, the teaching dates and time, the grade level, learning area, and quarter. So this is from Monday to Friday. So the first part, we all know this. So this is the objectives. Under the objectives, we have the content standards, the performance standards, and the learning competencies. For the objectives, then we also have to write the LC code for each of the competencies that we will that we have to meet, okay, within a specific day. Okay, so now let's try to go on with the content. Next are the learning resources. So this one is about the references that are used in teaching the content. So it includes the teacher's guide, the learner's materials, the textbook, and other materials from Learning Resource Portal. And if you have other learning resources that you have used. Okay, so the procedures. Let's move on now to the procedures. The first one is reviewing previous lesson or presenting the new lesson. Okay, so let's try to read it. Pagpapakita ng larawan ng mga note at rest upang maisagawa ang echo clapping, isasagawa ito bilang pagsasanay sumangguni sa TG pahina 11. So how can we integrate ICT in this activity? How can we make this a formative assessment with ICT integration? So I am sure that you are already thinking of possible activities in order to improve this one. So maaari po natin gawin pagpapakita ng larawan ng mga notes at rest sa pamamagitan ng paggamit ng Microsoft PowerPoint, or kung meron pa po kayong naiisip na maaring gamitin upang maisagawa ang echo clapping, isagawa ito bilang pagsasanay. So in this case, we were able to integrate ICT in the form of formative assessment. And aside from that, the cognitive level in Bloom's taxonomy, so makikita po natin ito, meron na po siya kaagad dito remembering, okay? A cognitive level that we can develop among our students. Okay, so next. Let's move on to establishing a purpose for the lesson. Awitin ang umaykat eskwela mula sa Unit 1, Aralin 2, pangkatin ang mga note at rest upang makabuo ng rhythm ayon sa time signature sumangguni sa TG, pahina 11. So, paano po natin ito may lalagyan ng ICT integration bilang form ng formative assessment? So, awitin ang umaykat eskwela mula sa Unit 1, Aralin 2 gamit ang Windows Media Player. Pero pwede po tayong gumamit ng iba pa kung ano po ang available sa ating paaralan, available sa guro, at available din po sa ating mga mag-aaral. Pangkatin ang mga note at rest sa pamamagitan ng class point upang makabuo ng rhythm ayon sa time signature. So what are the cognitive levels that we can develop among our learners? So pwede po dito yung understanding, pwede rin po dito yung analyzing, okay? Because the students, they have to classify, they have to group the notes and rest through class point. Okay, so hindi lang po natin na-attain yung mga purpose natin for this to engage our learners, but there are other more relevant skills that they can develop through this simple activity. Okay, so susunod po, letter C, presenting examples or instances of the new lesson. Sumangguni sa TG, panlinang na gawain, pahina 12, ipakita ang chart ng awiting baby seeds, iparinig ang awitin, ituro sa paraang note, awitin ng sabay-sabay ang baby seeds, sumangguni sa TG, pahina 12 at 13. Okay, so pwede po natin itong i-improve sa pamamagitan ng class point. Ipakita ang chart ng awiting baby seeds gamit ang class point. Iparinig ang awitin at ituro sa paraang note. Awitin ng sabay-sabay ang baby seeds at i-record gamit ang voice recorder sa mobile phone or kung ano pa pong application ang available sa mobile phone ng bata at iparinig sa klase ang recorded na awitin. Minsan, maganda rin po na bukod sa inaawit, yung marinig din po ng mga bata ano ang tunog ng kanilang boses kapag ito ay recorded. So bukod po dito, ano na naman po kaya ang mga skills ang maaaring ma-develop sa ating mag-aaral dito? So maaari po ito sa applying, pwede rin po ito sa evaluating, okay, or understanding. Next is discussing new concepts and practicing new skills. Itanong, ilang measure mayroon ang awit? Ano-anong mga simbolo ng musika ang nasa loob ng measure? Tukuyin ang mga note at rest na ginamit sa awiting. Paano nabuo ang mga measure? Ano ang time signature ng baby seeds? Ilan ang bilang ng kumpas sa bawat measure? So ito po, maaari po nating gawing basis for discussion na kung saan ang mga mag-aaral, pwede po silang sumagot verbally. This could be done through an interactive game. So, in terms naman of integration of ICT, maaari naman po na itong mga tanong na ito ay ilagay po natin at ang mga katanungan ay ilagay po sa Twinkle or gamitin po ang Twinkle kung saan doon maaaring magsagot ang mga mag-aaral. Again, we can make this more engaging, more motivating for our students, though we can use this as basis for a verbal discussion, or we can also make this or improve this with the use of Twinkle. Okay, next. Unang pangkat, isulat ang mga note at rest ng awiting baby seeds. Ikalawang pangkat, kukumpas habang umaawit ng baby seeds. Ikatlong pangkat, umisip ng angkop na kilos ng katawan ayon sa time signature upang bigyang buhay ang awiting baby seeds. So paano po natin ito mas mai-improve pa? Unang pangkat, isulat ang note. Okay, isulat ang note at rest ng awiting baby seeds gamit ang class point. Ang ikalawang pangkat naman po, pwede po silang kukumpas or kumumpas habang umaawit ng baby seeds at kuhanan ng video ang pagkumpas habang umaawit at pagkatapos niyan ay panoorin ang video ng pagkumpas habang umaawit ng baby seeds. Ikatlong pangkat, umisip ng angkop na kilos ng katawan ayon sa time signature upang bigyang buhay ang awiting baby seeds. At ito po, pwede rin po natin itong kuhanan ng video gamit ang mobile phone ng mga bata at sabay-sabay pong panoorin sa klase. Sa ganitong paraan, nabibigyan po natin ng mas engaging na activity ang ating mga mag-aaral. So ano naman pong mga cognitive levels? Ang cognitive level po ito maaring mag-fall. So pwede po ito sa understanding, applying, evaluating, analyzing. Yan. So tumataas po ang cognitive level habang nade-develop or doon sa sequencing po ng ating lesson from the beginning up to the lesson proper. And then up to the last part of the lesson. So tingnan po natin. Developing mastery, which leads to formative assessment. So we have here mula sa awit na baby seeds, lagyan ng naaangkop na salita ang bawat rhythmic pattern. Isasagawa ng pangkatan sa pamamagitan ng isang laro, kaunahang makapaglagay ng mga salita na angkop sa rhythmic pattern. So we can improve this by mula sa awit na baby seeds, lagyan ng naaangkop na salita ang bawat rhythmic pattern. Isagawa ng pangkatan sa pamamagitan ng isang laro gamit ang twinkle. Yan. So, pwede po natin gamitin ang twinkle at kung meron pa po kayong naiisip na interactive game na maaari pong gamitin ng ating mag-aaral, pwede rin po natin yung gamitin. Paunahang makapaglagay ng mga salita na angkop sa rhythmic pattern. So, dito po, meron po ditong remembering, pwede rin po itong applying and understanding. So, finding up practical applications of concepts and skills in daily living. Lahat ng bagay na ginagawa natin sa araw-araw ay may kaugnay na rhythm at pattern. Ang pagtibok ng puso at ating paghinga ay may rhythm. Kahit ang ating paglakad o pagtakbo ay may kaugnay ding rhythm. So ano po yung pwede natin gawin ditong activity? So pwede po natin dito itanong sa kanila, bukod dito, ano pa ang mga ating mga gawain na nagpapakita ng rhythm o pattern? Isulat ang inyong sagot gamit ang Mentimeter or gamit ang class point or twinkle. O, lagi po sinasabi ko kung ano po yung available at accessible po para sa ating mga guro at mag-aaral, pwede po natin itong gawin. Wherein we will be asking our students to write their responses sa pamamagitan ng mga application po na ito. And next, we have making generalizations and abstractions about the lesson. Anong time signature ang binigyang pansin sa ating aralin? Paano nabubuo ang rhythmic pattern? So, isulat ang inyong sagot sa mga sumusunod na katanungan gamit ang quizzes. So, pwede rin naman po ito na Q&A part, tanong po natin, tapos sagot po nila, or to make it more interesting for the learners, we can ask them to write their answers gamit ang quizzes. So, evaluating learning, pangkatin ang mga note ayon sa time signature at batay sa tamang bigkas ng mga salita. Gumamit ng bar lines, sumangguni sa TG, pagtataya pahina 14. Okay? So, gamit ang class point, maaari po nating sabihin sa ating mga mag-aaral na pangkatin nila ang mga note ayon sa time signature at batay sa tamang bigkas ng mga salita. So, dito po, merong remembering, merong understanding. So, yun po yung cognitive level na maaari po nating ma-develop sa Bloom's Taxonomy of Objectives. Next, additional activities for application or remediation. Pagpaparinig ng iba pang awitin sa time signature, pagbubuo ng mga rhythmic pattern batay sa mga note at rest na nakasulat na. So, paano naman po natin ito may improve? Pwede po nating sabihin sa ating mga mag-aaral na bumuo sila ng rhythmic pattern batay sa mga note at rest gamit ang class point or twinkle Sa mga iba pa po na nagagamit nyo na po before, pwede pong Kahoot o kung ano pa pong mga interactive game na pwede po natin gamitin para sa activity na ito. At dito po, since bubuo na ang mga mag-aaral ng rhythmic pattern, ito po ay mas mataas na level ng cognitive level sa Bloom's taxonomy. Kasi meron na po dito creating. Po. So, ang last part po ay yung paglalagay po natin ng remarks and reflection. Okay, so what do we usually write in our remarks? So, there are specific instances that result in continuation of lessons for the following day. It could also be because of reteaching, if we have insufficient time, or transfer of lessons as a result of class suspension. So those are the usual remarks that we put in our lesson plan. In the reflection, so this part of the DLP should be filled out right after the delivery of the lesson. So the teachers are encouraged to think about their lessons, particularly the parts that went well and the parts that were weak, and we have to write about it briefly. Okay, so that's about the remarks and reflection, which are part of our lesson plan. So we can also write here the number of learners who earned 80% in the evaluation, including those who require additional activities for remediation, if the remedial lessons work, the number of learners who have caught up with the lesson, and then the number of learners who continue to require remediation, and which of the teaching strategies that work well, and why did it work, including the difficulties that a teacher encountered, and how did the principal or supervisor help in solving the difficulty, and the innovation or localized materials the teacher used and wish to share with other teachers. Okay, so now let me share with you the sample lesson plan that I made, sample lesson plan with ICT integration, the one I used last October 15 of 2022. So it's the lesson plan in General Biology 1. Okay, this is intended for senior high school. Okay, so for the objectives, we have here the content standards and the performance standards. So the content standards is about the cell cycle, mitosis and meiosis, and the performance standards is for the learners to construct a 3D model of a plant, animal, bacterial cell using recyclable materials. Okay, for the learning competencies and the objectives, okay, so identify disorders and diseases that result from the malfunction of the cell during the cell cycle, and that is the code. And the objectives for the days are first one is to discuss the disorders and diseases that result from the malfunction of the cell during the cell cycle, solve for the probability of having a child with certain chromosomal disorders, suggest and demonstrate ways to show love and respect to the people afflicted with diseases due to chromosomal dysfunction during mitosis or meiosis. And in the content, it's about cell cycle and mitosis meiosis. Here are the different learning resources, including the references, the TG, the LM, and the other learning resources that I used for this lesson. Okay? For the review of the previous lesson, I used quizzes for this. So learners had to answer 10 questions about mitosis and meiosis. So that's the code that I asked the students to use in order for them to join or play the quiz. And we have here the sample question in quizzes, including the scores that the students got during this part of the lesson. So that's for the review, and the cognitive level that can be developed through this is, of course, remembering. Okay, for establishing the purpose for the lesson, I have shown the picture of Genghis Khan through quizzes, including the statement he popularized with one word missing. Do not scorn a weak flank. He may become a brutal tiger. So using quizzes, I had the learner select the word by dragging and dropping the word that would correctly complete the statement. So this one how this one shows how it looked like in quizzes. So the picture of Genghis Khan, and there is a blank over there, and we have there the choices, and all that the students had to do was to drag and drop the word that would correctly complete the sentence. And then once once they know the correct answer, actually it's do not scorn a weak cub, you may become a brutal tiger. I asked them some follow-up questions like how in what among all the four fundamental operations, which ones do you think could make a cub become a tiger? And if Genghis Khan inherited his privilege of being a Khan, what about genetic disorders? Can they also be inherited? So this part, this could give us a chance also to integrate this in history. Okay, so presenting examples or instances of the new lesson. I have shown the official trailer of the movie X-Men First Class through the PowerPoint. And I asked my students if they have watched any of the X-Men movies. And then I asked them, how did the normal people feel about the mutants? Do you think you can find any connection between how the mutants were treated in the movie and how people with genetic disorders are treated in reality? So this one could start a discussion that could trigger also the responses from the students on how did the normal people feel about the mutants and how the people in reality, how do they treat people with genetic disorders? Okay, and then for the next part is the discussion. Okay, we can initiate now discussion on the disorders and diseases. Okay, but to make it interesting for the learners, I asked them to use quizzes again and to choose between ja or nein. So ja means yes in German, while nein means no. So this is through quizzes again. Okay, that's the code. And that's how it looks like in quizzes. And that's the sample question. So once they have chosen the answer, of course, that will generate again another discussion. Okay, why is it yeah or why is it nein? Okay, so ask the students to solve the probability of producing a child with genetic disorder and have them choose the correct answer through quizzes. Okay, so just like this one, so what is the probability that a couple could produce a child with Down syndrome? Okay, so of course, they have to compute first and choose which is the correct answer using quizzes. Okay, so next is to tell the situation to the class. Suppose that you are a part of a group of volunteers of a social community outreach arm of the municipality of Rizal. One of your activities for the year is to hold a Thanksgiving party for the people with special needs, such as people with Down syndrome, Klinefelter syndrome, Edwards syndrome, Patau syndrome, cancer, and other diseases that result from the malfunction of the cell during the cell cycle. In conducting the activity, each group will be assigned specific tasks related to the dominant multiple intelligence within the group. So learners must have completed the McKinsey MI inventory prior to the activity, but you may also use other MI inventory for this activity. So the learners, they were given 10 minutes to do this. So since the learners were grouped into three, each of the groups were given, each of the group was given a task. So for the group one, the analytical group, using MS PowerPoint, present a budget proposal for the Thanksgiving party, and with the use of a mobile phone, create and present a 1-minute promotional video of the activity. So this is about differentiated instruction. Okay, introspective group, using a video recording application on your mobile phone, record and present a 3-minute video demonstrating meditation techniques that can help participants achieve a calm and peaceful state. Movements may vary from the movement of leaves, clouds, butterflies, and yoga. And for the third group, interactive group, using the available application on your mobile phone, record and present a TV broadcast to announce the upcoming Thanksgiving party. share the date, purpose of the program, the beneficiaries, the activities that we held, and the registration details. So from all these activities or tasks of the learners, there are already a lot of objectives and skills that may be developed among our learners. They could develop their skills in understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and even creating. So this is very important when we make our lesson plans. Okay? And then for the post activity, this is the time when I ask my students to perform and present their activity, and each of them were they were given 2 to 3 minutes to present their work, and they were also presented the rubric that I used for their performance in order to gauge or evaluate their performance. Okay, for the application using quizzes again, I asked them to watch the video clip of a twin with Down syndrome. And then I asked them, how did you feel after watching the video? How will you show your love and respect for people with genetic disorder? And then I asked them to write their answer in quizzes. Okay, and then making generalizations and abstractions about the lesson. I used quizzes again. This is another group activity, a collaborative formative assessment, wherein I asked them to draw a mind map in quizzes to show their answers to the following questions. And I asked them to explain their mind map to the class. So these are the questions that I asked them to answer through a mind map. Okay, so that's how it looks like in quizzes, including the scores of the learners and some of the responses or some of the mind maps I saw, okay, from the work of my students. Okay, and then for the evaluation part, okay, I use multiple choice type of questions using quizzes, and that's the code, including the link where my students used in joining. Okay, so this is just a sample of the question. Okay, question during the evaluation, a multiple choice type of question, and including the scores that my students obtained that time. Okay, for the additional activities for application or remediation, with your group mates, create a poster and Microsoft Word or PowerPoint about genetic disorder, and I asked them to upload it on or before October 18, 2022 at the Google Drive, and that's the link. Okay, and then I also gave them the criteria or the rubrics I used in order to evaluate their work. Okay, so for the remarks, the time allotted was not enough because there were a lot of tasks and activities that we had to complete. So I had to extend for an extra 10 minutes, okay, to finish the lesson. But the learners, there were 45 students who earned 80%, okay, on the formative assessment. There was one learner who required additional activity, and I made a remedial lesson on that student. And the number of students who caught up with the lesson, okay, 1. And no more learners needed remediation. And which of my strategies work well? I think it's the use of the ICT-based assessment because it motivated my students, it sustained their interest, okay, and they were engaged all throughout the lesson. So even if they are already in the senior high school, they still want engaging activities for them to stay with you all throughout the lesson and to have them really motivated and encouraged all throughout the lesson. And it's very important that they remain engaged. And the difficulties, I think it's the time allotment. Okay, it wasn't sufficient for that kind of activity because there were lots of activities during that time. And the innovation, I think it's the use of quizzes, okay, in doing formative assessments. And that's what I wanted to share with my colleagues. Okay, so that was the sample lesson plan that I made, okay, with ICT integration. And of course, as we design or develop our lesson plan, we also have to think about the Bloom's taxonomy of objectives. Okay, so I appreciate your willingness to learn with me. I hope that you have gained something from my presentation that would be relevant in doing your tasks in the school. I also hope that you took most of this opportunity and take away something new and exciting to share with your colleagues. Once again, thank you very much and have a great day.